I'm Dr. Mark with 10 years of medical experience, and you're watching Dr. Mark Official. Today, I want to talk about a question that sounds both fascinating and a little mysterious. Does your blood type reveal your lifespan? The truth about longevity. It's the kind of idea that spreads quickly because it feels personal. If something as simple as A, B, or O could predict how long we'll live, people would want to know immediately. But the real story is more nuanced and in many ways more empowering. Blood type can feel like a powerful label because it's genetic, permanent, and shows up in important medical moments. That can make it tempting to believe it works like a coded message about your future health or even how long you will live. But blood type simply doesn't function that way. It is not a built-in life expectancy timer, and it cannot reliably predict an individual's lifespan. The main reason is that lifespan is shaped by a huge number of interacting factors, and blood type is only one small trait among many. Longevity is influenced by complex genetics, hundreds or even thousands of genetic variations that affect inflammation, metabolism, DNA repair, cholesterol handling, blood pressure regulation, and immune function. Blood type represents variation in certain molecules on the surface of red blood cells, not a complete blueprint for aging. Even if blood type is associated with slight differences in risk for a few conditions, those differences are usually small compared with the impact of broader genetic and lifestyle factors. Another reason is that most research on blood type and health looks at population-level patterns, not personal destiny. Studies may find that one blood type is associated with a slightly higher or lower risk of a particular condition, but that does not mean everyone with that blood type will develop it, or that people without that blood type are protected. These are statistical trends, not predictions. For example, if a certain blood type has a modestly increased risk of blood clots, many people with that blood type will never experience clotting problems, while people with other blood types still can. Risk is influenced by age, smoking, weight, movement, hydration, medications like birth control, pregnancy, surgery, underlying illnesses, and family history, factors that can outweigh blood type. It also matters that living longer isn't determined by one disease alone. Lifespan is affected by heart disease, cancers, infections, accidents, mental health, substance use, and chronic conditions such as diabetes. Blood type doesn't control all those categories. Some associations exist, like non-O blood types being linked in some studies to slightly higher clotting tendency, or certain blood types being linked to differences in susceptibility to specific infections. But those links are not strong enough to act like a countdown clock. They don't account for the biggest drivers of early death, such as smoking, uncontrolled high blood pressure, poor diet, inactivity, heavy alcohol use, and lack of preventive health care. Finally, even when blood type influences risk, it often does so indirectly and can be moderated. A person with higher baseline clotting risk can still reduce overall danger by staying active, maintaining a healthy weight, managing blood pressure and cholesterol, and following medical advice during high-risk situations like surgery or long travel. In other words, whatever small role blood type plays is not fixed as an outcome. Health is dynamic. It changes with behavior, environment, medical care, and time. Blood type is one piece of biological information, but it is not a prophecy. The idea that blood type might affect lifespan mainly comes from medical research that looks for patterns across large groups of people. When researchers collect health data from thousands or even millions of individuals, they sometimes notice that certain blood types appear slightly more common among people with specific conditions. Those findings can be interesting, but they can also be easy to misinterpret. A small association can quickly turn into a dramatic claim online like, "This blood type lives the longest," even when the science does not support that kind of certainty. One of the most discussed areas is blood clotting. Some studies have found that people with non-O blood types, A, B, or AB, may have slightly higher levels of certain clotting-related proteins, such as von Willebrand factor and factor VIII. Higher levels of these proteins can, in some situations, be linked to an increased tendency for blood to clot. Over a lifetime, clotting risk matters because abnormal clots can contribute to conditions like deep vein thrombosis or pulmonary embolism, and clots also play a role in some heart attacks and strokes. However, slightly higher risk does not mean high risk, and it does not mean blood type is the main driver. Smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, long periods of immobility, certain medications, pregnancy, and age often have a much stronger effect on clot-related outcomes. On the flip side, blood type O is sometimes associated with a slightly lower risk of some clot-related conditions. This can make it sound as if blood type O automatically offers protection, and therefore guarantees a longer life. But that leap is not supported. First, the protective effect, if present, tends to be modest. Second, blood type O may carry different trade-offs. For example, some research suggests blood type O can be associated with a slightly higher tendency towards certain bleeding issues because of the same lower clotting factor levels that might reduce clot risk. That doesn't mean blood type O is bad either. It just shows how biology rarely offers benefits without complexity. Another place the idea comes from is infection risk. Blood type antigens can sometimes influence how certain bacteria or viruses attach to cells, or how the immune system interacts with them. Researchers have explored links between blood type and illnesses ranging from stomach infections to respiratory viruses. For instance, there has been research on blood type and susceptibility or severity patterns for particular infections. But again, these are probability shifts, not guarantees. Exposure level, vaccination, overall health, age, nutrition, crowding, and access to healthcare generally matter far more than blood type alone. Digestive conditions also show up in discussions. Some studies have reported associations between certain blood types and higher or lower rates of specific stomach or pancreatic diseases. A common example is research exploring whether non-O blood types have a slightly higher risk of certain digestive cancers. But these outcomes are influenced by many stronger factors, including smoking, alcohol, chronic inflammation, obesity, diet, Helicobacter pylori infection, and genetics unrelated to blood type. The most important point is that these findings are usually about populations, not individuals. An association does not prove that blood type causes the condition, and it does not predict what will happen to one specific person. Two people with the same blood type can have totally different lifestyles, medical histories, stress levels, and healthcare access, factors that can outweigh any small statistical link. Blood type may be one minor piece of a much larger health puzzle, not a deciding factor that determines anyone's fate. When researchers look at what truly predicts a longer life, the strongest influences are usually not rare medical mysteries or fixed traits like blood type. Instead, they are everyday exposures and habits that shape the body over decades. Longevity is largely about cumulative wear and tear on the heart and blood vessels, the lungs, the liver, the brain, and the immune system, and lifestyle and environment largely control how fast that wear and tear happens. Smoking is one of the clearest examples. Tobacco exposure damages nearly every organ system, increases inflammation, harms blood vessels, and dramatically raises risk for heart disease, stroke, lung disease, and many cancers. It also affects people who don't smoke through secondhand exposure. Few factors shorten lifespan as consistently as smoking, and the benefits of quitting begin quickly. Circulation improves, lung function stabilizes, and risk declines over time. Compared with that, any small health differences linked to blood type are typically minor. Blood pressure and cholesterol are major drivers of heart disease and stroke, which remain leading causes of death worldwide. High blood pressure often has no symptoms until it causes serious damage, which is why it's sometimes called a silent risk. Diet, exercise, stress, sleep, and genetics all play roles, but regular monitoring and treatment can significantly reduce risk. Cholesterol is similar. Managing LDL, bad cholesterol, through diet, activity, and, when needed, medication can prevent plaque buildup in arteries and lower the chance of heart attack and stroke. Diabetes risk and blood sugar control also matter because chronically elevated blood sugar damages blood vessels and nerves and increases risk for kidney disease, heart disease, vision loss, and infections. The factors that most strongly influence type 2 diabetes, body weight, activity level, dietary patterns, sleep, and stress are often modifiable. Even small improvements in routine, like walking daily and increasing fiber intake, can improve insulin sensitivity and reduce long-term risk. Diet quality influences longevity through multiple pathways: inflammation, gut health, blood pressure, cholesterol, and weight. Diets rich in vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and healthy fats are repeatedly linked with better long-term outcomes, while heavy intake of ultra-processed foods, added sugars, and excess sodium is linked with worse outcomes. Portion habits matter too, not because of strict rules, but because consistent overeating over years can push the body toward obesity, fatty liver disease, and metabolic problems. Physical activity and muscle strength are protective in ways people often underestimate. Aerobic activity supports heart and lung health, while strength and balance reduce frailty, falls, and loss of independence later in life. Muscle is also metabolically active tissue that helps regulate blood sugar and maintain resilience during illness. Even modest, regular movement can meaningfully shift long-term risk. Sleep quality is another pillar. Poor sleep disrupts hormones that regulate appetite and stress, raises blood pressure, worsens insulin resistance, and affects mood and immune function. Chronic sleep deprivation can quietly increase risk for many diseases over time. Stress management matters because chronic stress can lead to unhealthy coping behaviors and directly affects hormones and inflammation. Social connection and mental health are tightly linked to longevity as well. Isolation and untreated depression are associated with higher risk of illness and earlier death, while supportive relationships are protective. Finally, environment and access to care make a major difference. Preventive screening, vaccines, early detection, and consistent treatment can turn serious diseases into manageable conditions. Alcohol use and safety habits, like seatbelt use, safe driving, and avoiding risky substance use, also affect lifespan in very direct ways. Together, these factors can add or subtract years, and unlike blood type, they offer practical opportunities for change starting now. Blood type can't reveal your lifespan because lifespan is not controlled by a single biological label. It's the result of many overlapping influences, genetic, environmental, social, and behavioral, that interact across decades. When people try to reduce something as complex as aging to one factor like ABO type, the explanation becomes more like a catchy story than a reliable scientific claim. To start with genetics, longevity is shaped by far more than one gene or one system. Blood type is determined mainly by variation in the ABO gene and the Rh factor by other genes, which affects certain molecules on red blood cells and some related processes in the body. But aging and disease risk involve many pathways: DNA repair, inflammation regulation, cholesterol metabolism, blood pressure control, insulin sensitivity, immune surveillance, and cellular stress responses. Each of those pathways is influenced by numerous genetic variants, each with small effects that can add up in different ways. Two people can share the same blood type and still have very different inherited risks for heart disease, cancer, or neurodegenerative illness because their overall genetic profiles are different. In other words, blood type is just one tiny visible piece of a much larger genetic picture. The second reason is the enormous role of environment and lived experience. The conditions you grow up and live in, access to nutritious food, safe housing, clean water, education, stable income, and quality healthcare, strongly shape long-term health. Exposure to air pollution, workplace hazards, chronic stress, violence, or unsafe neighborhoods can increase disease risk regardless of blood type. On the other hand, supportive communities, opportunities for physical activity, and access to preventive care can protect health. Even within the same country, life expectancy can vary greatly between regions due to differences in these environmental and social factors. That variation alone shows why a single biological characteristic can't reliably reveal lifespan. The world around you can push risk up or down far more than your ABO group. The third reason is how scientific findings about blood type are often misunderstood. Many studies that explore blood type and disease report small differences in risk, and those differences are averages across a population. A modest relative increase in risk can sound dramatic in headlines, but may translate into a small absolute difference for an individual. Also, not all studies agree. Results can vary by ethnicity, geography, sample size, and study design. Some associations may be influenced by confounding variables, other traits that travel with blood type in certain populations, rather than blood type being a direct cause. And even when an association is real, it's rarely strong enough to predict an outcome on its own, because real-life risk depends on many other factors such as smoking, diet, blood pressure, diabetes, activity level, body weight, medications, and family history. This is why statements like "people with blood type X live longer" are usually oversimplifications. They take a subtle statistical pattern, often limited, context-dependent, and not necessarily causal, and turn it into a fixed rule that can mislead people into false reassurance. I'm safe because of my blood type, or unnecessary worry. I'm doomed because of mine. The truth is that health is probabilistic and individualized. Blood type might slightly shift risk in specific situations, but it can't meaningfully forecast how long any particular person will live. Knowing your blood type is useful in specific medical situations, like transfusions, surgery planning, pregnancy care, or emergencies, because it helps healthcare teams act quickly and safely. But when it comes to living longer, the most effective approach is not to search for predictions in a lab result. It's to build habits and an environment that reduce the biggest risks over time. The encouraging part is that many of the strongest longevity factors are within your influence, and small, consistent changes often matter more than dramatic short-term efforts. Regular movement is one of the most reliable tools for long-term health. Walking is a great foundation because it's accessible and supports cardiovascular fitness, circulation, and mood. Adding strength training, even 2 or 3 times per week, helps maintain muscle mass, bone density, and balance as you age, lowering the risk of frailty and falls. Stretching and mobility work help preserve range of motion and reduce aches that can make people less active over time. The goal isn't perfection, it's creating a routine you can repeat for years. Eating for long-term health doesn't have to be complicated either. Diets linked with better outcomes tend to be built around whole or minimally processed foods: vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, whole grains, nuts, and quality protein sources. Fiber is especially important because it supports gut health, helps regulate blood sugar, and improves cholesterol levels. Reducing ultra-processed foods, items high in added sugar, refined starches, sodium, and certain fats, can lower the risk of weight gain and metabolic disease. Portion habits also matter. Learning what enough feels like and building meals that satisfy with protein and fiber can make healthy eating more sustainable. Protecting your heart is another major theme because heart disease and stroke are leading causes of early death. That protection starts with knowing your numbers. Blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, and sometimes waist circumference or body mass index. Many people feel fine even when blood pressure is high, so checking it regularly is crucial. If your numbers are elevated, lifestyle changes can help, and medications, when needed, can be life-saving. Managing these risks early prevents damage that becomes harder to reverse later. Sleep is often underestimated, but it's foundational. Consistent sleep supports immune function, mood, learning, appetite regulation, and cardiovascular health. Poor sleep can raise stress hormones, increase cravings for high-calorie foods, and worsen blood pressure and blood sugar control. Practical improvements include keeping a consistent sleep schedule, limiting caffeine late in the day, reducing screen time before bed, and creating a quiet, dark sleep environment. Not smoking is one of the biggest longevity decisions a person can make. If someone doesn't smoke, the priority is avoiding starting and minimizing secondhand exposure. If someone does smoke, quitting at any age improves health and reduces risk over time. Support can include nicotine replacement, medications, counseling, and structured quit plans. Strong relationships also matter more than many people realize. Social connection is linked to lower stress, better mental health, and healthier behaviors. Having people who encourage you, check on you, and share life with you can be protective in both direct and indirect ways. Alongside that, preventive care, vaccinations, cancer screenings, dental care, and routine checkups helps catch problems early when they're easier to treat and prevents infections and complications that can shorten life. These choices don't just add years, they add better years, more energy, independence, and a higher quality of life as you age. So does your blood type reveal your lifespan? No, not in any direct or destiny-like way. Blood type might slightly shift certain health risks, but it does not determine how long you'll live. The truth about longevity is that it's shaped far more by daily habits, healthcare, and the world around you than by a letter on a blood test. And that's good news, because it means longevity is not just something you're born with. It's something you can build. Thank you. Your blood type doesn't decide your lifespan. Your daily habits do, like subscribe and start building a longer life today.